The linen partition swung open at 11:17. Smoke clung to a chef's coat like a second skin. 9 hours behind a custom smoker. Brisket perfect, bark like leather. Nobody in that garden knew. String lights turned oak trees into something out of a movie. Champagne on silver trays. Jazz quartet by the fountain. 200 guests in suits that cost more than most people's rent. Then he saw her white silk, diamond ring catching the light, hand resting on the arm of a man whose face sold magazines. She saw him back. For 1 second her smile didn't change, then it did. The garden went quiet in pieces. The couple nearest them first, then the jazz quartet, then everyone. She straightened her spine the way she used to before meetings she expected to lose. Only this time she wasn't going to lose. This time she was going to say something that would change everything. Nobody in that garden knew the chef they'd just humiliated was richer than all of them combined. In 3 hours, Kenneth Marshall would inherit $140 billion. But first, he had to watch the woman he'd loved for 9 years tell 200 strangers he'd spend his whole life in a kitchen. The linen partition swung open at 11:17. Kenneth stepped through with smoke still clinging to his chef's coat. 9 hours behind a custom smoker he'd hauled in on a trailer, oak and hickory. The brisket had come out perfect, bark like leather, inside pink and tender enough to pull apart with a fork. The coordinator, young woman, clipboard, headset, smiled at him the way event staff smile at vendors. Professional, distant. She gestured toward the fountain where 200 guests stood under string lights that turned the oak trees into something out of a movie. Step out and take a bow, she'd said 20 minutes ago. The hosts want to thank you personally. Kenneth wiped his hands on a towel that had been white that morning. Looked down at his boots, leather, worn. Flecks of ash on the toes. He almost said no, almost. But Kenneth Marshall had spent 34 years being the kind of man who didn't make scenes. Who showed up early, who said yes ma'am and thank you and I appreciate it. So he followed. The garden opened up in front of him like a spread in a magazine he'd never read. Swan House. Buckhead. Old Atlanta money. The kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. Champagne moved through the crowd on silver trays. A jazz quartet played near the fountain. Soft. Expensive. Kenneth scanned faces out of habit. Didn't recognize most of them. Recognized the type. Tall men in navy suits. Women in dresses that cost more than his monthly lease payment. Shoes that had never touched gravel. Then he saw her. Stephanie Abbott stood 15 feet away in white silk that caught the light every time she moved. Champagne flute in her left hand, right hand resting on the arm of a man Kenneth had seen on magazine covers. Christopher Hayes, 36, tall, blonde, the kind of clean-cut confidence that came from never worrying about rent. VP at Hayes Development Group, the kind of man whose father owned hotels and whose mother chaired charity boards. The kind of man Atlanta Business Journal called a visionary. Kenneth stopped walking. The coordinator kept going for 3 steps before she realized he wasn't behind her anymore. Turned, looked confused. Kenneth didn't move. Stephanie saw him for 1 second, maybe less. Her smile didn't change. Frozen. Perfect. The smile she'd practiced in mirrors when she was 22, and broke and convinced the world would open up, if she could just learn to hold her face the right way. Then the smile got smaller, harder. Christopher said something Kenneth couldn't hear and Stephanie laughed. Light, musical. The laugh she used for clients. Kenneth felt heat rising up from his collar. Not anger, not yet. Something worse. Recognition. The coordinator reached Kenneth and touched his elbow. Gentle. Trying to move him forward without making it obvious. He let her. Crossed the remaining distance to the fountain, where Christopher extended a hand. Firm grip. Eye contact that lasted exactly long enough to be polite and not 1 second more. Thank you for the incredible food. Seriously. That brisket. Christopher's voice had the kind of easy confidence that came from never having worried about rent, from never having driven Lyft until 3 in the morning to cover someone else's licensing fees. Kenneth shook the hand without feeling it. Looked at Stephanie. She was looking past him, over his shoulder. At the partition he'd just stepped through. The word came out before Kenneth could stop it. The garden didn't go quiet all at once. It happened in pieces. The couple nearest them stopped talking first. Then the group by the catering table. Then the jazz quartet trailed off mid-phrase like someone had unplugged them. Stephanie set her champagne glass on the fountain's edge. Limestone. Probably older than Kenneth's restaurant. She straightened her spine the way she used to before walking into meetings she expected to lose. Only this time she wasn't going to lose. The coordinator looked between them, took a small step back. Kenneth. Stephanie's voice came out level, practiced. This isn't the time. When is? Christopher's hand had fallen away from Stephanie's arm. He stood very still, watching Kenneth now with the kind of focus that meant he was running calculations. Do you two know each other? Stephanie breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. Kenneth had watched her do that 1,000 times, before big listings, before client calls, before telling her mother she wasn't coming home for Christmas. Decision made in 2 seconds. Cut clean or drag it out. She chose clean. Kenneth runs a barbecue place, over on Memorial Drive. We used to know each other. Someone laughed. Uncertain, nervous, Kenneth didn't look to see who. We were together. His voice came out quieter than he'd planned. 9 years the laughter died. Stephanie tilted her head, eyes very bright. The way they got when she was about to say something she'd practiced. Kenneth is a sweet man, but let's be honest in front of everyone. She looked around the garden, at the lights, at the champagne, at the 200 people who'd paid $500 a plate to be here. You're going to spend your whole life inside a kitchen. I'm not. I never was. Nobody spoke. Woman near the catering table set down her glass too hard. It clinked against marble. Kenneth looked at Stephanie for a long time, watched her face. The one he'd memorized 9 years ago, the one that used to go soft when she laughed. The one that had cried into his shoulder the night her first brokerage failed. That face was gone, replaced by something smooth and practiced and very far away. Kenneth nodded once, slight, the way a man nods when he's filing something away inside himself for later. Turned around, walked back through the partition. His sous chef, Maria, 5 years at Marshall's Smokehouse, looked up from breaking down the station. You good, boss? Kenneth took off his apron, folded it, set it on the steel prep table. Finish up without me, Maria didn't ask. Kenneth got into his van, backed out of the service area, drove. Atlanta at night looked different than it used to. Taller, brighter, more glass, more cranes, more buildings going up in neighborhoods that used to be empty lots and dive bars. More expensive. The kind of expensive that pushed people like Kenneth further out, further east, further from the city that magazines called the new somewhere. He drove east on Memorial Drive, past closed storefronts, past the gas station, where he used to stop for coffee at 5 in the morning, past the intersection where Stephanie's first apartment had been, the one with the broken air conditioner and the upstairs neighbor who played bass at 2 a.m. Gone now. Luxury condos. Kenneth pulled into the gravel lot behind Marshall's Smokehouse at 12:40, killed the engine, sat. The building was dark, squat, brick. The sign out front said Marshall's in red letters that had faded to pink on the south side where the sun hit hardest. He'd opened it 7 years ago, with money borrowed from 3 different credit cards and a handshake loan from a supplier who'd known Kenneth's father. Paid it all back, every cent. Kept the doors open through a pandemic that had killed half the restaurants in the city. Kept his staff on payroll when other places were laying off. Kept the lights on. For what? Kenneth got out of the van, walked to the back door, key in the lock, turned. Inside smelled like smoke and fryer oil and the industrial cleaner Maria used on the floors. Familiar, comfortable. Home. He sat down at the back booth, didn't turn on the lights. The clock on the wall ticked. Analog. Hands that moved in jerks. 1:17. The phone rang. Kenneth looked at it, lying face up on the table. Screen glowing white in the dark. Boston area code. He almost didn't answer. Almost. But Kenneth Marshall had spent 34 years being the kind of man who answered the phone. Who showed up. Who didn't leave people hanging. So he picked up. Mr. Marshall. The voice on the other end was older. Professional. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who wore ties every day. Yes, this is Robert Caldwell. I'm calling from Boston. I'm the estate attorney for Edward Marshall. Kenneth didn't place the name immediately. Then he did. Uncle Edward, younger brother of Kenneth's father, the one who'd come to Christmas in 1996 when Kenneth was 6. Tall, quiet, brought a pocket knife with a bone handle, left before dinner without saying goodbye. The one nobody talked about, the one who'd cut ties with the family after a fight Kenneth had never been told the details of, who'd moved to Boston, who'd built something, who'd become, in the gaps left by silence, a kind of ghost. Mr. Marshall, I'm very sorry to inform you that Edward passed away 3 days ago. He'd been ill for some time. Kenneth closed his eyes. I'm sorry to hear that. Robert Caldwell paused. The kind of pause that came before something big. Edward named you as the sole beneficiary of his estate. I know this may come as a surprise. He left very specific instructions, and I'd like to fly down to Atlanta tomorrow to meet with you in person. Kenneth opened his eyes, looked at the dark kitchen, at the prep tables, at the walk-in cooler, at the life he'd built with his own hands. What kind of estate? Another pause. Longer this time. The estate consists primarily of Marshall Capital Holdings. It's a privately held company with operations in commercial real estate, energy, and logistics across 12 states. Edward also maintained several residential properties and a significant portfolio of liquid assets. Robert Caldwell stopped. The current audited valuation of the estate is approximately $140 billion. The kitchen was very quiet. Kenneth heard the hum of the walk-in cooler, the tick of the clock, his own breathing. I understand this is a great deal to take in. I can answer more questions tomorrow when we meet. Would 2 o'clock work for you? Kenneth looked at his hands. Knuckles still red from 9 hours at the grill. Calluses from 7 years of hauling pork shoulders and splitting wood. 2 o'clock is fine. Good. I'll see you then, Mr. Marshall. The line went dead. Kenneth set the phone down, face up, screen fading to black, sat in the dark for another hour before he stood up and went home. The phone call should have felt like a dream. It didn't. Kenneth woke up at 5:30 the next morning in the house he'd bought with Becca in 2012. Small, craftsman style, East Atlanta Village. 15 minutes from the restaurant. The mortgage was almost paid off. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, looked at his phone. No missed calls, no messages, nothing from Stephanie. Not that he'd expected anything. He opened his laptop, searched Edward Marshall Boston, got nothing. Tried Edward Marshall Commercial Real Estate, still nothing. Marshall Capital Holdings. The search pulled up a single result, a filing with the Delaware Secretary of State from 1987. Lists of officers. None of the names meant anything to Kenneth. He closed the laptop, drank his coffee, thought about Stephanie standing in that garden in white silk, saying you're going to spend your whole life inside a kitchen. Thought about the way Christopher Hayes had looked at him. Polite, dismissive. The way you look at someone who's not a threat. Kenneth finished his coffee, showered, put on one of the 2 suits he owned, black. Bought for Becca's funeral, still fit. Barely. He drove to the Four Seasons in Midtown, parked in the garage, took the elevator up to the lobby, marble floors, high ceilings. The kind of place where doormen wore white gloves. Robert Caldwell was waiting in a private meeting room on the 3rd floor. 60, gray hair. Charcoal suit that fit perfectly. Leather briefcase that looked older than Kenneth. They shook hands, sat. Robert opened the briefcase, pulled out 3 folders, set them on the table, pulled out a sealed envelope. Set it on top. Before we go through the assets, I need to read you something. Edward wrote this 6 months ago when he knew he was running out of time. Robert broke the seal. Unfolded 2 pages, handwritten, blue ink. Kenneth, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I never introduced myself properly. After your father and I fought in 1989, I told myself I'd cut ties forever. Pride. Stupid pride that cost me 25 years. When Rebecca died, I came to the funeral. I stood in the back. You didn't see me. I watched you hold yourself together for her parents. Watched you thank every single person who came. Watched you stay standing when anyone else would have broken. I saw your father didn't show. He and I still weren't speaking. I saw Stephanie hold your hand through the whole service. I started watching after that. Not in any way that would disturb your life. Just checking in. Made sure you didn't lose the restaurant during the pandemic. Made sure Rebecca's memory stayed alive. I funded a scholarship in her name, $25,000 a year. Culinary students. I donated to the cancer wing at Northside Hospital the month she died. $50,000. Anonymous. I never reached out because I didn't want to disrupt what you'd built with money you didn't earn. But I wanted you to have it when I was gone. Not because you're family, because you're kind. I built Marshall Capital over 40 years. Started with money my grandfather left from his timber business. Got lucky with Boston real estate in the 80s. Luckier with energy contracts in the 90s. By 2000, I was managing wealth I'd never imagined. By 2020, I was managing wealth I couldn't spend. But the world I built cost me everything that mattered. Cost me your father. Cost me the chance to know you. Cost me any peace I might have had. I'm leaving everything to you because of all the Marshall men. You stayed kind when you had every reason not to. You lost your wife. You got knocked down. You got back up. You didn't become bitter. Here's the condition. You'll have 90 days. During those 90 days, you'll be managing partner of Marshall Capital Holdings. Full executive authority. Access to every account, every property, every contract. You can use them however you wish. But if at any point, during those 90 days you use the company's power to humiliate, ruin, or take revenge on another human being, the inheritance is revoked. Every asset passes to the Atlanta Community Foundation and to cancer research. The judgment will be made by Robert Caldwell acting as sole arbiter. Based on conduct, not outcome. I don't care if you build or sell or merge. I care whether the boy who was kind when he was poor stays kind when he's rich. Don't waste 90 days hating the woman who left. Spend them building something Rebecca would be proud of. Robert folded the letter, set it on the table. Kenneth stared at it. He has a scholarship in Becca's name? Robert nodded. Started it 3 months after she passed. He's funded it every year since. Kenneth felt something catch in his throat. I didn't know. He didn't want you to know. He wanted to help without disrupting your grief. Robert opened the first folder. This is the company structure. Marshall Capital Holdings is the parent. Underneath are 3 operating divisions. Commercial real estate, energy, logistics. 41 buildings across 12 states. 15 logistics centers. Energy contracts in 7 markets. He slid a page across the table. This is the balance sheet as of last quarter. Total assets $142 billion. Total liabilities $9 billion. Net equity $133 billion. Kenneth looked at the numbers. Looked back at Robert. This is real. Yes. Robert opened the second folder. These are the office bios. Chief Financial Officer is William Brennan. He's been with Edward for 19 years. Regional directors for each division. Accountants. Lawyers. He paused. They don't know Edward passed yet. We've kept it quiet until you decided whether to accept. Kenneth leaned back. What happens if I say no? Everything passes to the foundations immediately. The company dissolves. Assets liquidate over 5 years. And if I say yes, you sign the documents. You become managing partner effective immediately. The 90-day clock starts. I stay on as observer and arbiter. At the end of 90 days, if you've met the condition, the company transfers to you permanently. What if I fail the condition? Robert looked at him steadily. Then you lose everything, and you walk away with nothing. Kenneth thought about Stephanie, about the garden, about the way she'd said, "You're going to spend your whole life inside a kitchen." Thought about Christopher Hayes, about Buckhead, about the life Stephanie had chosen instead of the one she'd had with him. Thought about Edward's letter. Don't waste 90 days hating. He looked at Robert. He'll sign tomorrow morning. Kenneth went back to Marshall's smokehouse that evening. The dinner rush was ending. 12 tables, couples, a family with 2 kids, 3 men in construction gear, still dusty from a job site. Maria looked up from the register when he walked in. Didn't expect you tonight. Kenneth tied on an apron, needed to work. He spent 3 hours at the grill, flipping ribs, basting chicken, pulling brisket, let the rhythm settle him. The smoke, the heat, the muscle memory of 7 years. This was real. The rest of it, the phone call, the lawyer, the letter, the number with all those zeros, that felt like something happening to someone else. But this was real. At 9:30, he sent Maria home, locked up, drove back to the house in East Atlanta Village, sat in the driveway. Becca's garden was overgrown. He kept meaning to weed it, kept not doing it. She'd planted tomatoes the summer before she got sick, big heirloom ones that turned dark red and split if you left them on the vine too long. They'd grown wild after she died, taken over half the side yard. Kenneth couldn't bring himself to pull them up. Every summer they came back. Every summer he let them. He went inside, sat at the kitchen table, opened his laptop, searched Marshall Capital Holdings again. This time he added Edward Marshall. Still nothing. Silent company, private, no press, no profiles, just money moving through the world like water through pipes. Invisible until it wasn't. Kenneth closed the laptop. Thought about the condition. 90 days. Don't use the power to humiliate or ruin or take revenge. He thought about Stephanie's face in that garden. About Christopher Hayes shaking his hand. About the words that had come out so easily. You're going to spend your whole life inside a kitchen. Kenneth stood. Walked to the bedroom, opened the closet. pulled out the box he kept on the top shelf. Inside were Becca's things. Not all of them, just the ones he couldn't put anywhere else. Her wedding ring, the necklace her mother had given her, the notebook where she'd written down recipes, the scarf she'd worn to chemo appointments because the hospital was always cold. At the bottom was a photo. Their wedding, October 2012. Outside, the light coming through the trees the way it only does in Georgia in the fall. Becca was laughing. Kenneth had his arm around her. Both of them young. Both of them broke. Both of them sure it would work out somehow. It had. For 7 years. Then it hadn't. Kenneth thought about the 9 years with Stephanie. How they'd started. How they'd ended. Fall 2014. Atlanta Community College. Night class. Small business management. Kenneth 25. Stephanie 22. She had a borrowed coat. Notebook full of plans. She wanted to sell luxury homes. Wanted her name in papers. Wanted out of the trailer park. Kenneth believed her from the first conversation. 2015. Kenneth opened Marshall's Smokehouse. East Atlanta Village. Small. 14 tables. Stephanie worked assistant at a brokerage firm. Studied for her license. Kenneth drove Lyft nights. Covered her fees. 2018. Becca diagnosed. Stage 3 breast cancer. Kenneth cut back to 60 hours a week at the restaurant to be with her. Stephanie held his hand through chemo appointments. February 2019. Becca died. 14 months after diagnosis. Stephanie told Kenneth at the funeral, "She'd want you to keep going. I'm here." 2020. Pandemic. Marshall's Smokehouse went takeout only. Kenneth worked 16-hour days to keep staff. Stephanie's firm pivoted to luxury homes outside the city. Business boomed. She was home less. Dinners got cancelled. Texts got shorter. Kenneth told himself, "She's busy. She earned this." 2023. Stephanie launched her own brokerage. Kenneth refinanced Marshall's Smokehouse. Loaned her $80,000. One night she asked, "Do you ever want more than the restaurant?" "Kenneth, I got everything I need." Stephanie looked at him. Long silence. Said okay in a voice that was different. Late 2023. Stephanie met Christopher at a charity gala. Professional at first. Then not spring 2024. Kenneth hadn't seen Stephanie in 9 weeks. She said she was traveling for work. She was engaged to someone else. Kenneth set the photo on the nightstand. Lay down on top of the covers. Looked at it until he fell asleep. Robert Caldwell flew back to Boston that night. Kenneth signed the documents the next morning at 9. Became managing partner of Marshall Capital Holdings effective immediately. The company accountant, Patricia Voss. 53, Stanford MBA, 18 years with Edward. Arrived at Marshall's Smokehouse at 2 in the afternoon with 3 banker's boxes and a laptop. She set up at the back booth. Walked Kenneth through the portfolio. 41 buildings. Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, 4 in Atlanta, office towers, retail centers, industrial parks, warehouses, residential properties in Scottsdale and Santa Fe. Apartment complexes near universities, Austin, College Station, San Marcos. Energy contracts tied to natural gas distribution. Logistics centers that moved freight for companies Kenneth had heard of. Revenue last year was $9 billion. Profit was $2.3 billion. Patricia pulled up a map on her laptop. And then there's parcel J47. The map showed 3 lots in Buckhead. Shaded different colors. This is the Buckhead Gateway project. Mixed-use development, hotel, retail, residential. Hayes Development Group announced it 6 weeks ago. $980 million. She highlighted the 3 parcels. Hayes owns 2 of them. We own J47. It's the access parcel. Without it, they can't get road access from Peachtree. Without road access, the project dies. Kenneth stared at the screen. Hayes Development structured their financing against projected revenue from the project. If they don't break ground by August 15th, their lender calls the note. She looked at Kenneth. They'll be insolvent in 90 days. Kenneth felt something cold move through him. Duns, Hayes know we own it? They know Marshall Capital owns it. They don't know Edward passed. They don't know you're the heir. They've been negotiating through intermediaries for 18 months. What was Edward going to do? Patricia hesitated. He signed a letter of intent in March. Fair market price. $3.2 million. But he never executed the final paperwork. Why? I don't know. He got sick right after. Stopped coming to the office. I thought maybe he forgot. Or maybe. She stopped. Maybe what? Patricia closed the laptop. I think he was waiting for what? Patricia looked at him carefully. I think he was waiting to see what you would do. Kenneth spent the next 3 days learning the company. Patricia walked him through every division, every property, every contract, showed him the organizational chart. 12 senior officers, 47 managers, 180 employees total. Showed him the cash position. 4 billion liquid, another 6 billion in securities. Showed him the debt. 9 billion across various instruments, all secured, all current. The company was clean, profitable, run by people who knew what they were doing. And now it was Kenneth's. For 90 days. If he could pass a test he didn't fully understand. On the 4th day, Patricia scheduled the first board meeting. Marshall Capital headquarters, Midtown Atlanta, 14th floor, glass and steel, views that stretched to Stone Mountain on clear days. Kenneth drove there in his van, parked in the garage, took the elevator up. The reception area had marble floors and a desk, where a young woman in a gray suit sat behind a computer. She stood when Kenneth walked in. Mr. Marshall, they're ready for you. Conference room, walnut table, 12 chairs, 11 of them filled. William Brennan stood when Kenneth entered. CFO, 52, served Edward for 19 years, gray suit, thin tie. Handshake that was firm but not aggressive. Gentlemen, this is Kenneth Marshall, Edward's nephew. He'll be observing during a transition period while I'm not observing. Kenneth set his folder on the table. Looked around the room. I'm managing partner. Effective 4 days ago, I'll be running point for the next 90 days while we figure out what comes next. Silence. One of the men, late 40s, expensive suit, cufflinks that caught the light, leaned back in his chair. Brian Porter, Regional Director for the Southeast Division. With all due respect, most of us have been with this company for 10 years or more. We know the properties. We know the deals. We know the markets. He gestured at Kenneth. You run a barbecue restaurant. Kenneth looked at him. I do, Brian smiled. Tight. Professional. Maybe it makes sense for you to observe while we handle operations. Until you get up to speed. Kenneth pulled out the chair at the head of the table. Sat. Walk me through your division. All of it. Revenue by quarter, expenses, margin. Where you're losing money you shouldn't be losing. Brian's smile faltered. That's a lot of detail for a first meeting. Then we better get started. The meeting went 4 hours. Each officer presented their division. Kenneth asked questions. Not sophisticated questions. Not the kind of questions MBAs asked. The kind of questions a man who'd run a small business for 7 years asked. What's your labor cost as a percentage of revenue? Where are you over budget and why? What's the margin on your last 3 deals? Which properties are underperforming and what's the plan? Simple questions. Specific questions. Questions that cut through jargon and required actual answers. Brian Porter opened his laptop 20 minutes in. Started answering emails. Kenneth waited until he was mid-sentence in a presentation about retail occupancy rates. Brian looked up, closed the laptop. I'm just checking on. Close it. Brian hesitated. Looked around the table. Nobody met his eyes. He closed the laptop. Kenneth leaned forward. You were saying occupancy is down 3% year over year in the Lenox Square properties. Why? Brian swallowed. Market conditions. New competition. We're working on. Kenneth cut him off. Patricia sent me the leasing reports yesterday. Your team hasn't returned calls from 4 interested tenants in the last 60 days. 3 of them signed with competitors. Brian's face went red. That's not. It's in the call logs. Your assistant keeps them. I read all of them last night. Silence. Kenneth sat back. Anyone else want to tell me what market conditions are doing to their numbers? The rest of the meeting went differently. Officers paid attention, took notes, answered questions directly. Brian Porter didn't open his laptop again. At 6 o'clock, Kenneth stood. Thank you. We'll meet again next week. Same time. He walked out. William Brennan followed him to the elevator. That was unexpected. Kenneth pushed the button. Which part? William smiled. Small, genuine, all of it. The elevator doors opened. Kenneth stepped in. I'll see you next week. William. The doors closed. The story broke 3 days later. Atlanta Business Chronicle ran it on page 4. Headline: Marshall Capital under new management. Barbecue chef takes helm. The article was short. Mentioned Edward's death. Mentioned Kenneth as heir. Mentioned Marshall's smokehouse. Quoted an anonymous source. He's a backwoods cook who can't read a balance sheet if you printed it on a menu. Kenneth read it in the back of a car on his way to a site visit in Birmingham. Patricia was sitting beside him. Brian Porter. Kenneth folded the paper. I know you going to do anything about it? Kenneth looked out the window. Atlanta sliding past. Glass towers. Construction cranes. The city rebuilding itself every 5 years into something unrecognizable. No, Patricia raised an eyebrow. No. He wants me to react. I'm not going to. Kenneth met her eyes. I'm going to work. And when the numbers come in, everyone will see who can read a balance sheet. The Birmingham deal closed 2 days later. Office tower. Class A downtown. 70% occupied. Seller wanted $12 million. Kenneth sat through 2 hours of presentations, lease comps, tenant profiles, market analysis. Asked 4 questions. Why is occupancy 70% instead of 90? What's the average lease term? How many tenants are up for renewal in the next 18 months? What's the building's actual condition versus what the inspection report says? The seller's team stumbled on 3 of them. Kenneth offered $9.3 million. The seller countered at 11. Kenneth stood up. 9.3. Take it or we walk. The seller took it. Saved Marshall Capital $2.7 million. William Brennan didn't say anything in the car afterward, but he stopped smiling at the worn heels on Kenneth's shoes. Kenneth found the box in Edward's office 2 weeks later. The office had been kept exactly as Edward left it. William's orders. Nobody touched it. Kenneth went through it on a Saturday morning when the building was empty. Desk, filing cabinets, bookshelf. The box was in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Cardboard, unsealed. Inside were photos. Kenneth and Becca's wedding. October 2012. How did Edward get this? Becca's funeral. February 2019. A shot from the back of the room. Kenneth shaking hands with mourners. Stephanie beside him, hand on his arm. Marshall's smokehouse. Opening day. Kenneth in an apron, holding a beer, grinning. Kenneth at a food bank. April 2020. Pandemic. Handing out meals, masked, exhausted. How long had Edward been watching? Beneath the photos were documents, receipt. Northside Hospital. March 2019. $50,000. Anonymous donation. Cancer wing. Scholarship agreement. Rebecca Marshall Memorial Scholarship. Atlanta Community Foundation. $25,000 per year. Renewable. For culinary students demonstrating financial need. Funded since 2019. Kenneth sat back. Edward had been there. Not just watching from a distance there. At the funeral, at the opening, at the food bank. Helping Kenneth found the second letter at the bottom of the box. Unsealed. Handwritten. Same blue ink. Kenneth, if you're reading this, you found the box. Good. I couldn't stay away after Rebecca died. I know what it's like to lose someone and have nobody help. Nobody did for me. I wanted to for you. I started the scholarship because she loved food, loved teaching people. I thought it would keep her memory alive in a way that mattered. I donated to the hospital because I couldn't donate when she needed it. I was too proud to reach out while she was sick. By the time I decided to, she was gone. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. I built this company over 40 years and it cost me everything. Cost me your father. Cost me you. Cost me any chance at peace. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. I just want you to do better than I did. Don't let the company turn you into someone you don't recognize. Don't waste these 90 days hating Stephanie. She left because she was afraid. Fear makes people cruel, but cruelty doesn't have to last forever. Build something that does. Kenneth read it twice, folded it, put it in his pocket. That afternoon he drove to Westview Cemetery. Becca's grave was in the old section, under a magnolia tree, simple headstone, gray granite. Rebecca Lynn Marshall, 1985 to 2019. Beloved wife, Kenneth sat on the grass. I met your guardian angel. Turns out I'm related to him. Wind moved through the magnolia. He's been taking care of things. Scholarship in your name. Hospital donation. Kept an eye on the restaurant during lockdown. Kenneth pulled a dandelion out of the ground next to the headstone. I inherited his company. $140 billion. Can you believe that? Silence. There's a condition. 90 days. I can't use it to hurt anyone. If I do, I lose everything. He looked at the headstone. Stefani showed up at an engagement party last month. She's marrying some buckhead developer. Told everyone I'm going to spend my whole life in a kitchen. The magnolia branches moved, and the thing is, Becca, I could destroy him, the developer. I own the land he needs for his biggest project. Without it, his company goes under. Kenneth closed his eyes. I could take everything from him, and I want to. God, I want to. He opened his eyes. But you'd tell me not to, wouldn't you? No answer. Just wind. Kenneth stood. I don't know what to do yet. But I'm trying to figure it out. He touched the headstone. I miss you. Drove home. The press conference was 6 weeks into the 90 days. Georgia World Congress Center. Commercial Real Estate Summit. Annual event. Biggest developers in the Southeast. Financial press from New York and Charlotte and Nashville. Kenneth hadn't planned to go. William convinced him, you need to be seen. People need to know Marshall Capital is still operational, still active. Kenneth wore a suit William had insisted he buy. Navy, tailored, fit like it was supposed to, felt like a costume. The conference hall held 800 people. Kenneth sat in the back, listened to panels about market trends, about construction costs, about zoning changes. Then the moderator took the stage before our keynote. I want to recognize someone who's new to our community. She looked toward the back. Marshall Capital Holdings has been the largest commercial landholder in Metro Atlanta for over a decade. Most of us have done deals with them without ever meeting the owner. Edward Marshall kept a very low profile. She paused. Edward passed away 2 months ago. The company is now under new leadership. Kenneth Marshall is here today. Kenneth, would you stand? Kenneth stood. Every head in the room turned. He walked down the aisle. Stephanie was in row 3. Green dress. Hair perfect. Diamond ring catching the light. Kenneth didn't look at her. Reached the stage. Shook the moderator's hand. Kenneth is managing partner of Marshall Capital Holdings. We're grateful to have him with us. Polite applause. Kenneth looked out at the room. 800 people who moved money, who built buildings, who shaped the city. 800 people who didn't know him. Yet thank you. I won't take much time. I know you're here for the keynote. He paused. I spent most of my life on the other side of rooms like this, cooking food for the people in the front rows. I intend to remember that. He stepped back, sat down in the front row, 2 seats from Stephanie. Never looked at her. The moderator introduced the keynote speaker. Christopher Hayes, VP, Hayes Development Group. Christopher walked to the podium. Confident, polished. The kind of man who'd been on stages like this his whole life. He talked about vision, about Atlanta's future, about development that elevated instead of displaced. 15 minutes in, he unveiled renderings for Buckhead Gateway. $980 million, hotel, retail, residential, flagship project for Hayes Development, partnership with the city, with investors, with the community. Christopher clicked to the next slide. Location map. 3 parcels highlighted. We've secured 2 of the 3 parcels needed. Final parcel is in negotiation with Marshall Capital Holdings. He looked down at Kenneth. Kenneth, since you're here, would you like to say a word about the partnership? The room went quiet. Every camera turned toward Kenneth. He stood, walked to the podium. Christopher stepped aside. Kenneth looked out at 800 people. It's a good project. We're looking forward to seeing how the partnership develops. He paused. I don't have anything else to add. Stepped back. Sat down. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then 2 men in the front row stood. Shook Kenneth's hand. Then 5 more stood. Then a whole section. Within a minute, half the room was on its feet. Not applauding, just standing, acknowledging. Christopher was still at the podium. Stephanie hadn't moved. Someone in the back filmed it. Posted it online an hour later. Caption: The barbecue chef owns the room. The invitations started arriving 3 days after the press conference. Envelopes, heavy stock, embossed logos. Capital City Club. Membership committee requests the honor of your presence. Piedmont Driving Club. Board of Governors extends an invitation. Atlanta History Center. Gala benefit. Reserved seating. Kenneth left them unopened on the kitchen counter. Watched them pile up like snow. Patricia called on a Tuesday morning. Senator Whitfield's office reached out. Wants to have lunch. Kenneth was at Marshall's Smokehouse, prepping brisket for the weekend rush. What does she want? She didn't say. Just asked if you available Thursday. Tell him I'm not. Patricia paused. Kenneth, these relationships matter. The senator chairs the Commerce Committee. She can. I know what she can do. Kenneth set down his knife, and I'm not interested. He hung up, went back to trimming fat off a 14-pound brisket. Let the rhythm settle him. Muscle memory. 7 years of this. Longer if you counted the years before he owned the place. Learning from men who'd learned from their fathers. This was real. The rest of it. The invitations, the lunch requests, the people who suddenly wanted to know him. That was something else. Maria came in through the back door. Apron already on. Hair tied back. We got a problem with the smoker. Temperatures running hot. Kenneth wiped his hands. I'll look at it. William Brennan showed up at the restaurant that evening. Kenneth was closing. 9:30. Last customers gone. Chairs up on tables. Floors mopped. William knocked on the glass door. Kenneth let him in. They sat at the back booth. Same one where Patricia had first shown Kenneth the portfolio. Same one where Kenneth had sat alone the night of the engagement party. William set a folder on the table. We need to talk. He opened it. Pulled out printed emails. Brian Porter leaked the barbecue chef story to the Chronicle. Kenneth already knew, and William slid the emails across. He's been talking to Christopher Hayes. Started right after the press conference. Kenneth felt his throat tighten. Talking about what the company, how to pressure you into selling parcel J47. Kenneth read them. Christopher to Brian, need intel on Marshall's financials. Anything we can use. Brian to Christopher, new guy's out of his depth. Give it time, he'll crack. Christopher to Brian, time's the one thing I don't have. August 15th deadline. After that the whole thing collapses. Kenneth set the emails down. How'd you get these? William smiled. Thin Brian uses his company email for everything, including things he shouldn't. Kenneth looked at the emails again. What do you want me to do? Fire him. Kenneth leaned back. No, William's eyebrows went up. He's leaking confidential information to a party you're negotiating with. That's grounds for immediate termination. Possibly legal action. I know. Then why? Because firing him proves he got to me. Kenneth closed the folder. Let him talk. Let Christopher think I'm out of my depth. When the time comes, they'll see William studied him. You're not what I expected. Kenneth stood. Good. Neither was Edward, I'm guessing. The box arrived at Marshall's smokehouse on a Thursday. Plain cardboard. No return address. Left at the back door. Maria found it during her morning smoke break, boss. Someone left you a present. Kenneth opened it in the kitchen. Inside were files. Photocopies. Highlighted sections. Marshall Capital Holdings financial statements. Confidential. Marked internal use only. Property assessments. Development plans. Cash flow projections. Everything someone would need to understand the company's position. Everything someone would need to find weak points. At the bottom of the box was a note. Handwritten. Thought you should know what your friend Brian's been sharing. You might want to check where else these documents have been going. No signature. Kenneth called William. We've got a bigger problem than I thought. The investigation took 3 days. William brought in the company's outside counsel, white shoe firm. Partners who billed $800 an hour. They traced the documents back through email servers and print logs and security footage. Brian Porter had copied 47 confidential files over the past 6 weeks, sent them to Christopher Hayes, sent them to 2 competitors, sent them to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. The lawyer, sharp suit, sharper eyes, laid it out in the conference room. This is corporate espionage. Criminal. We can prosecute. Kenneth looked at the evidence. Thought about Brian sitting in the first board meeting, laptop open, smirking. Thought about the Chronicle article. Backwoods cook who can't read a balance sheet. Thought about Edward's letter. If at any point you use the company's power to humiliate or ruin another human being, the inheritance is revoked. What happens if we fire him without prosecuting? The lawyer frowned. He gets away with it. Kenneth looked at William. Fire him. Today. Full severance, non-disclosure agreement. He signs or we prosecute. William nodded slowly. And Hayes? Kenneth stood. Leave Hayes to me. Brian Porter cleaned out his desk that afternoon. Security watched him, made sure he didn't take anything that wasn't his. He left without saying goodbye to anyone. Kenneth didn't watch him go. Stayed in Edward's office. His office now. Reading through files Patricia had pulled Protry records for parcel J47, acquired 2008. Appraised value in 2021, 2.8 million. Current ask from Hayes Development, 3.2 million. Edward had signed the letter of intent in March. 3 weeks before he got too sick to work. 3 weeks before he'd written the letter to Kenneth. Why sign it and not execute? Kenneth pulled up the development timeline. Hayes Development announced Buckhead Gateway in April. 6 weeks after Edward signed the letter of intent, public announcement, press conference, renderings, the works, but no final sale on J47. Why? Kenneth called Patricia the letter of intent Edward signed. Was it contingent on anything? She pulled the file, yes. Standard contingencies, title review, environmental assessment. Financing. When was financing supposed to close? June 30th. Kenneth looked at the calendar. That was 3 weeks ago. Patricia went quiet. Hayes missed the deadline. Which means the letter of intent is void. We're under no obligation to sell. Kenneth felt it click into place. Edward knew. Knew what? Kenneth leaned back in the chair. He knew Hayes Development was overextended. Knew they'd structured too much debt against projected revenue. Knew they'd missed deadlines. Pause. He signed the letter of intent to string them along. Keep them thinking the deal would close. Keep them announcing the project. Keep them digging deeper. Patricia's voice came through carefully. That's a theory. It's the only theory that makes sense. Edward didn't forget to execute. He chose not to. Why? Kenneth looked out the window. Atlanta spread below. Glass and steel and construction cranes rebuilding the city into something unrecognizable every 5 years. Because he wanted me to make the choice. Not him. The offer came 2 days later. Christopher Hayes called Kenneth's office directly. Not through lawyers, not through intermediaries. Direct. Kenneth took the call on speaker. Patricia and William in the room. Kenneth. Thanks for taking my call. Christopher's voice had the same easy confidence it had at the engagement party. Practiced. Smooth. What can I do for you, Christopher? I wanted to talk about parcel J47. I know we've had our intermediaries in conversation, but I thought it might be more productive if we talk principal to principal. Kenneth waited. Christopher continued. The letter of intent we had with Edward lapsed. I take full responsibility for that. We had some financing delays, but we're back on track now. Kenneth still didn't speak. I'd like to restart negotiations. 3.2 million. Same terms. Clean sale. Closes in 30 days. Kenneth looked at Patricia. She shook her head slightly. I'll need to think about it. Christopher's voice tightened. Just slightly. Kenneth, I'll be straight with you. We need that parcel. The whole project depends on it. I'm prepared to go to 3.5 million if that helps move things along. That's generous. Kenneth kept his voice neutral. But I still need time to think. How much time? I'll let you know. Kenneth hung up. William whistled low. He's desperate. Patricia pulled up the financing documents they'd gotten from Brian's leaked files. Hayes Development has 80 million in bridge loans due August 15th. If Buckhead Gateway doesn't break ground by then, the lenders call the notes. And if the notes get called? Patricia closed her laptop. Hayes Development goes insolvent. The company folds. Christopher's father loses the hotels. The whole thing collapses. Kenneth stood. Walk to the window so I can end them. Yes. With one decision, yes. Kenneth thought about Stephanie in white silk. About the garden. About the words that had come out so easily. You're going to spend your whole life inside a kitchen. Thought about Christopher shaking his hand. Polite. Dismissive. I could destroy him. William's voice came quiet. You could. Kenneth turned. What would Edward do? William looked at him carefully. I don't know. Edward never told me about the condition. Never told me about the test. I only found out from Robert after you signed. He paused. But I know what Edward became, and I don't think he liked it much. The countermove came faster than Kenneth expected. 3 days after Christopher's call, Marshall's Smokehouse lost 2 suppliers in one morning. First, the meat vendor. Been working with Kenneth for 6 years. Called at 7 am. Kenneth, I'm sorry. I got an offer I can't refuse. Exclusive contract with Hayes Hotels. Big money. But it means I can't supply you anymore. Kenneth felt it coming. Hayes Hotels. Christopher's family business. When does this start? 2 weeks. Second call came at 8. Oak supplier. Same story. Same buyer. By 9 am. Kenneth had lost the 2 vendors who'd kept his restaurant running through a pandemic. Maria found him in the walk-in cooler, staring at inventory. We going to be okay, boss? Kenneth didn't answer right away. Yeah, we'll find new suppliers. Maria crossed her arms. This is about that developer, isn't it? The one marrying Stephanie. Kenneth looked at her. How'd you know? Maria shrugged. Small world. My cousin works events. She saw what happened at the Swan House. Told me some suit humiliated you in front of everyone. She paused. That him? Yeah. You going to do something about it? Kenneth thought about Edward's letter. About the condition. About 90 days running out faster than he'd thought possible. I don't know yet. William called that evening. We've got another problem. Kenneth was at home. Kitchen's table. Laptop open. Searching for new suppliers. What now? There's going to be an opinion piece in the Chronicle tomorrow. When Old Money blocks New Atlanta, Kenneth closed his eyes. Let me guess. Anonymous sources. William's voice was grim. They're implying you're using inherited power to sabotage development projects for personal reasons. That you're holding up Buckhead Gateway out of spite. Are they naming me? Not directly, but they describe the situation in enough detail that anyone in the industry will know. Kenneth opened his laptop. Pulled up the Chronicles website. The piece was already posted. Early digital edition. He read it. Marshall Capital Holdings. The privately held real estate giant that emerged from decades of secrecy after founder Edward Marshall's death, now sits at the center of a brewing controversy. Sources close to the Buckhead Gateway development say negotiations for a key access parcel have stalled under new leadership. The parcel, valued at approximately $3 million, is reportedly being withheld for reasons that have nothing to do with fair market value. One source, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested personal animus may be at play. When old money meets new ambition, the source said, sometimes the city pays the price. Kenneth closed the laptop. They're trying to force my hand. William's voice was quiet. It's working. I've gotten 3 calls today. Colleagues asking what's going on, whether Marshall Capital is going to be a good partner going forward. What'd you tell them? That we operate in good faith, always have. Always will. Pause. But Kenneth, they're going to keep pushing. Hayes is desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. I know, so what are you going to do? Kenneth looked out the window. East Atlanta Village. Porch lights coming on. People getting home from work. Normal lives. Uncomplicated lives. The opposite of his. I'm going to work. Kenneth spent the next 2 weeks rebuilding supply chains. Found a new meat vendor in Macon. Family operation. Higher prices but good quality. Found a new oak supplier in South Carolina. Willing to deliver twice a week. Costs went up 15%. Kenneth absorbed it. Didn't raise menu prices. Marshall's Smokehouse stayed open. Stayed busy. The regulars kept coming. But Kenneth saw the looks. Heard the whispers. Is that the guy from the article? The one holding up the big development? Why would he do that? Kenneth kept his head down. Worked the grill. Smiled at customers. Acted like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. The flattery wave came in week 7. Invitations flooded. Headliners Club. Most exclusive in Atlanta. Board seats. 3 different non-profits. Senator from Texas called personally. Stephanie's mother. Who'd told Kenneth at Christmas 2017 that her daughter deserved better than a cook. Sent a handwritten card asking if he might come to brunch. Kenneth answered none of them. But internally, something shifted. He started enjoying the power. The silence when he entered rooms. The way people stood. The fear he'd seen in Christopher's eyes at the press conference, week 8. Town car, back from a site visit in Charleston. William sat beside him, didn't look over when he spoke. Last 8 weeks easiest I've had at this company. Because you still listen. Because you haven't started believing what people say about you. Pause day, you start believing them. You'll lose this company faster than you got it. Kenneth said nothing. Thought about that conversation for the rest of the night. Realized William was right. He was starting to believe. Starting to want revenge. And that was dangerous. Week 9. Christopher's investigation firm delivered their report. Kenneth Marshall, widower, small business owner, no criminal history, no connection to Edward that anyone could document beyond a single Christmas visit. But the firm discovered something else. Marshall Capital owned parcel J47. Without it, Buckhead Gateway, Without Buckhead Gateway, Hayes Development's financing collapsed. Christopher read the report twice. Understood by the end, Kenneth Marshall could end his family's company with a single phone call. He didn't tell Stephanie. Told her instead that there were small complications with financing. That nothing was wrong. She didn't press. She'd been distracted for weeks. Her assistants had noticed her watching the press conference clip on her phone in back seats of cars. She hadn't slept well in 23 days. Week 10. Christopher made his move. Hired investigators to approach Kenneth's suppliers. Meat vendor offered exclusive Hayes Hotels contract. Oak supplier the same. 2 vendors folded, 1 refused. Leaked stories to press. Opinion piece ran. When old money blocks New Atlanta. Lawyer sent formal letter. Restraint of trade lawsuit threatened unless good faith negotiation resumed. Patricia showed Kenneth the letter. It's bullshit legally. But it'll tie us up for 18 months. And it'll be public. Kenneth looked at the document, thought about crushing Christopher. About using Marshall Capital's legal team to bury Hayes Development in motions and depositions and discovery requests until they ran out of money. Let them file. Patricia looked surprised. You sure? Yeah, Kenneth set down the letter. They won't. It's a bluff. Christopher can't afford an 18-month lawsuit. He'll be insolvent in 60 days. Patricia studied him. You've thought this through. Kenneth met her eyes. I've thought about a lot of things. Day 73 arrived on a Thursday. Kenneth was at Marshall Capital headquarters, meeting with division heads, reviewing third quarter projections. His assistant, Sarah, efficient, hired by William 2 weeks ago, knocked on the conference room door. Mr. Marshall. You have a visitor. I'm in a meeting. She hesitated. It's Miss Abbott. The room went quiet. Kenneth looked at William, at Patricia, at the 3 other officers around the table. Give me a minute. He stepped into the hallway. Stephanie was standing by the elevators. Black coat, hair down, no ring. She'd already made her choice before walking in. Kenneth felt his chest tighten. What are you doing here? Stephanie turned. Her eyes were red. I need to talk to you. We don't have anything to talk about. Kenneth. Please. Her voice broke on the word. Kenneth looked back at the conference room, everyone pretending not to watch through the glass. Not here. He led her to Edward's office, closed the door. Stephanie stood in the middle of the room, looked around, at the desk, at the view, at the life Kenneth had inherited. I was wrong. Kenneth didn't sit, didn't offer her a chair. About what? Everything. Stephanie's hands were shaking. She pressed them together. I was afraid. I've been afraid my whole life. Afraid of being poor again. Afraid of ending up like my mother. Afraid of… She stopped. Kenneth waited. Afraid of you never wanting more. There it is. Kenneth's voice came out flat. That's what this is about. You left because I was happy with the restaurant? No. Yes, I don't know. Stephanie looked at him. You were content, Kenneth. And I admired that. I did. But I couldn't be. Every time I drove past the trailer park where I grew up, every time I saw someone living the way we used to live, She stopped again. I needed to be somewhere else. Someone else. So you chose Christopher. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Things don't just happen, Stephanie. You made choices. Kenneth felt something cold settling in his chest. You chose to stop coming home. You chose to lie about where you were. You chose to show up at that engagement party and humiliate me in front of everyone. I know. Stephanie was crying now. Real tears. Not the kind she used for negotiations. First time since Becca's funeral, I know, and I've regretted it every single day since. She took a step toward him. Christopher's company is in trouble. I know you have the power to save it, or end it. Kenneth felt it click. That's why you're here. No, you want me to sell him the parcel. I'm not asking you to save him. Then what are you asking? Stephanie looked at him. Mascara running. Perfect facade cracking. I'm asking if there's any version of the future where you and I… She didn't finish. Kenneth stared at her, felt the weight of everything pressing down. The inheritance, the condition, the 73 days. The choice he'd been avoiding. I need 24 hours. Stephanie nodded, wiped her eyes. Okay. She walked to the door, stopped, turned back. For what it's worth, I did love you. I still do. Kenneth didn't answer, watched her leave. Stood alone in the office for 10 minutes before going back to the conference room. William took one look at his face. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Kenneth didn't sleep that night. Sat in Edward's office until the city outside went dark, until the cleaning crew came through, until security did their rounds. Read Edward's letter again. Don't waste 90 days hating the woman who left. Looked at the photo he'd brought from home. Becca, wedding day. Laughing. What would you tell me to do? No answer. Just silence. Kenneth pulled up the files on Buckhead Gateway. $980 million project. Hotel, retail, residential, 800 construction jobs. 2,000 permanent jobs once it opened. Good for the city, good for Atlanta. But it would save Christopher Hayes. Would make Stephanie's choice look smart. Would prove that the backwoods cook couldn't play hardball with the big boys. Kenneth closed the laptop, opened it again. Pulled up the foundation documents Edward had established. The ones that would get everything if Kenneth failed the test. Atlanta Community Foundation. Cancer research, good causes, money that would help people. More people than one development project would help. But it wouldn't be Kenneth's choice. Wouldn't be his to deploy. Wouldn't be his chance to build something that mattered. Kenneth stood, walked to the window. Atlanta spread below, lights stretching to the horizon. A city of 5 million people who didn't know him. Didn't care about his choice. Wouldn't notice either way. But he would notice. He would have to live with it. Every day, for the rest of his life. Kenneth looked at his reflection in the glass. Tried to see himself the way Edward had seen him. The way Becca had seen him. Tried to see past the anger. Past the hurt. Past the 9 years of building something just to watch someone else call it small. Tried to see what staying kind when you're rich actually meant. At 4 a.m., he made the decision. Called Robert Caldwell. I need you at a meeting Monday morning, 10 a.m. Marshall Capital Headquarters. Robert's voice was alert despite the hour. He'd been expecting this call. I'll be there. Word spread fast. By Friday afternoon, half of Atlanta's commercial real estate community knew something was happening Monday. Kenneth Marshall had called a meeting. Hayes Development was invited. This was it. The decision. Patricia fielded 17 calls that afternoon. From reporters. From industry people. From Christopher's competitors who wanted to know if they should start circling. She declined all comment. Told them to wait until Monday. Christopher Hayes arrived at 9:50 Monday morning. Alone, no lawyers, no advisors, no father. Just him. Dark suit, single folder. He sat in the conference room and didn't open the folder. Kenneth watched him on the security monitor from his office. Saw the way Christopher's leg bounced under the table. Saw the way he kept checking his phone. Saw the way he looked at the door every time someone walked past. Desperate William came in. It's time. Kenneth stood, straightened his tie, walked to the conference room. William behind him. Robert Caldwell was already there. Far end of the table. Yellow legal pad. Black pen. Hadn't written anything. Just watching. Kenneth sat across from Christopher. Didn't offer his hand. Room quiet for almost a minute. Then Kenneth spoke. I understand your company structured its financing against Buckhead Gateway. Without parcel J47, the project can't move forward. Without the project, your financing collapses. Christopher nodded. Once that's correct, my lawyers have confirmed all of it. The bridge loans. The August 15th deadline. The insolvency timeline. Christopher's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. I could end Hayes Development as a going concern. One signature. One decision. Kenneth paused. You know that. Christopher's voice came out steady. Steadier than Kenneth expected. I know that. I didn't come here to negotiate the facts. I came to ask what you're going to do. Kenneth looked at him. This man who'd stood at the Swan House with his arm around Stephanie. Who'd shaken Kenneth's hand without really seeing him. Who'd announced Buckhead Gateway like it was already done. This man who'd hired investigators to dig into Kenneth's past. Who'd pressured Kenneth's suppliers. Who'd leaked stories to the press. This man who was about to lose everything. Kenneth thought about Edward's letter. About Becca's grave. About the man he'd been before any of this started. About the man he wanted to be when it ended. I'm going to sign the parcel over. Christopher didn't move. Original letter of intent price, 3.2 million. Clean transfer. No contingencies. No leverage. Kenneth kept his voice level. Marshall Capital does this because it's good for Atlanta. The city needs the housing, needs the jobs, needs the development. Pause. I'm not doing it as a favor to you. I'm not doing it for any reason that has to do with you at all. Longer pause. But after the transfer closes, Marshall Capital won't do business with Hayes Development again. Not while you're running it. Not while your father's running it. We're done. Kenneth stood. That's not negotiable. Christopher sat very still. When he finally spoke, his voice was thinner than before. I understand. He looked down at his hands. I would have done worse. If our positions were reversed. Pause. I'm sorry. He said it like a man who didn't know yet how much he was sorry for. Kenneth nodded. Walked out. Robert Caldwell stayed in his seat. Watched Christopher gather his folder. Stand. Leave. Then Robert closed his notepad. The test was over. Kenneth found out later that Stephanie had been waiting in the hallway. She'd come after all. Despite Christopher telling her not to. Despite knowing it wouldn't change anything. She'd heard everything through the door. When Christopher came out, she tried to talk to him. He walked past without looking. Got on the elevator. Gone. Stephanie stood there for 5 minutes. Then Kenneth came out. She crossed the hallway. I heard. Kenneth stopped. I don't understand. You could have ended him. Any other man in this building would have. She paused. I would have stood by you through it. Kenneth looked at her in the morning light coming through the windows. Saw her completely for maybe the first time. That's why I didn't. Stephanie frowned. What? You would have stood by me through revenge. Not through the right thing. That's the difference between the man you think you came back to and the man who actually exists. Kenneth felt something settle in his chest. I'm not coming back. No anger in his voice. No cruelty. Just fact. Stephanie started crying, real tears streaming down her face. I loved you. I did. But I loved the idea of more. She couldn't finish. Kenneth waited. More than I loved you. She got it out. I know. Kenneth said it quietly. I hope you find what you're looking for. He walked past her. Down the hall. To the elevator. Didn't look back. Robert Caldwell met Kenneth in the lobby 20 minutes later. They walked to the parking deck together. At Kenneth's van, Robert stopped. The 90 days aren't technically up, but the inheritance is secure. I reviewed everything with the committee. You passed. Kenneth felt something loosen in his chest. When do I need to sign? Final documents will be ready next week. But that's formality. The decision's made. Robert extended his hand. Your uncle would be proud. Kenneth shook it. I hope so. Robert got into his car. Drove away. Kenneth sat in his van for 10 minutes. Then drove to Westview Cemetery. Becca's grave looked the same. Magnolia tree. Gray granite headstone. Kenneth sat on the grass. I did it. Made the choice. Signed over the parcel. Didn't crush him. Whined through the magnolia branches. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I kept thinking about what you would say, silence, and about what Edward wrote. About not becoming someone I don't recognize. Kenneth pulled a weed growing next to the headstone. Stephanie came back. Asked if there was a future for us. He looked at the dates on the stone. There isn't. I can see that now. She loved what I could give her more than she loved me. And that's not enough. More wind. I think I'm going to be okay, Becca. Finally, Kenneth stood, touched the headstone, drove back to the city. The news broke that afternoon. Hayes Development and Marshall Capital finalized Buckhead Gateway land deal. Project to break ground September 1st. Christopher issued a statement. Professional. Grateful. No mention of Kenneth by name. Just thanks to all partners who made this possible. The Chronicle ran a follow-up piece, much shorter than the opinion piece. Marshall Capital's new leadership proves willing to work with development community. Buckhead Gateway proceeds. No apology for the earlier implications. Kenneth didn't expect one. William came to Marshall's smokehouse that evening. Found Kenneth at the grill. Saturday night rush. Line out the door. I wanted to say something. Kenneth flipped ribs. Yeah? The last 10 weeks. I wasn't sure what to expect. Edward was brilliant but difficult. Demanding, sometimes cruel. William paused. You're not like him. And that's good. Kenneth pulled brisket from the smoker. Let it rest. I'm just trying to do right. I know. William headed to the door. Stopped. One more thing. We need to talk about what you want to do with the foundation money. What foundation money? Edward established accounts. Designated for charitable work. He never spent them. They've been sitting there accumulating interest for 20 years. How much? William smiled. About 200 million. Kenneth almost dropped the brisket. The planning took 3 weeks. Kenneth, Patricia, William. 2 lawyers. An accountant who specialized in foundation structures. They met at Marshall Capital headquarters every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Designed 2 funds. First fund. Low-interest loans for small restaurants. No collateral required. Just 3 years of tax returns and a conversation with the owner. For people trying to keep their doors open when rent ran ahead of revenue. Second fund. Support for families dealing with cancer. Bill assistance. Transportation. Lodging. The things insurance didn't cover. The things that bankrupted people while they were trying to save someone they loved. Kenneth named it the Becca Marshall Foundation. Not the Edward Marshall Foundation. Not the Kenneth Marshall Foundation. Becca's. Because she would have wanted to help. Because this was the kind of thing she used to talk about when they were young and broke and sure they'd change the world somehow. Because Kenneth missed her. The foundation launched in October. Quiet. No press conference. No announcement. Just a website and an application process and a phone number people could call. First round of grants went out in November. 47 restaurants across 11 cities. Total deployed, $12 million. Family Support Fund helped 300 families in the first month. Total deployed, $8 million. Kenneth didn't put his name on any of it. Didn't do interviews, didn't take credit, just worked. Ran Marshall Capital part-time. William handled day-to-day operations as CEO. Ran Marshall's Smokehouse the rest of the time. Still worked the grill every Saturday night. Still served everyone in order. Still made the best brisket in Atlanta. One Saturday in December, a man Kenneth didn't recognize came in. 40s, work jacket, Tired eyes ordered the brisket plate, ate slowly, carefully, like he was savoring it. Kenneth was clearing tables when the man stopped him. "You Kenneth Marshall?" "Yeah." The man extended his hand. "Marcus Webb. I own Webb's Barbecue over on Glenwood." Kenneth shook it. "I know the place. Good ribs." Marcus smiled. "Not as good as yours. But we're working on it." Pause. "I wanted to thank you. The Becca Marshall Foundation. They gave me a loan 6 months ago. 75,000. No collateral. Just believed me when I said I'd pay it back." Marcus's voice got thick. "Saved my business. Saved my life. My kids still got a dad with something to be proud of." Kenneth felt something catch in his throat. "I'm glad we could help. I don't know who runs that foundation. But if you ever meet them, tell them thank you. Tell them they're doing something that matters." Kenneth nodded. "I will." Marcus left. Kenneth stood there for several minutes, then went back to the grill. 6 months passed like water through a sieve. Kenneth ran Marshall Capital from the 14th floor 3 days a week. Ran Marshall's smokehouse the other 4. Lived between 2 worlds that didn't quite fit together, but didn't need to. The foundation deployed another $30 million by March. 82 restaurants funded. 700 families helped through cancer treatment. Names Kenneth would never know. Lives he'd never see. Impact that moved through the world invisible and real. Like Edward had moved through Kenneth's life for years. Watching, helping, never announcing himself. Kenneth understood it now. The weight of money, the loneliness of it, the way it separated you from everyone who didn't have it and made you suspicious of everyone who wanted it. Better to help quietly. Better to let the work speak. Christopher Hayes stepped down from Hayes Development in February. Quiet resignation. Press release that mentioned pursuing other opportunities. His father took back operational control, restructured the debt, brought in new partners, saved the company. Buckhead Gateway broke ground in March. Kenneth drove past it once, saw the construction fence, the cranes, the foundation being poured, kept driving, didn't stop. Stephanie closed her brokerage in April. Kenneth heard about it from Maria, who heard it from her cousin, who worked events where real estate agents gossiped. Word was Stephanie had moved to Charleston, started over, small firm. First-time home buyers instead of luxury listings. Different life. The letter arrived in May. Plain envelope, Charleston postmark. No return address. Kenneth opened it at the kitchen table. Morning coffee. Sunlight through the window. Stephanie's handwriting. "Kenneth, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. But I needed to write it. You were right. About everything. I spent 9 years with someone who saw me, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who held my hand through the worst moments of my life, and I threw it away because I was chasing something I thought would make me matter. It didn't. The only time I ever mattered was when I was with you. I'm in Charleston now, working with young couples trying to buy their first homes, people like we used to be, people who worked 2 jobs to save for a down payment. Last week I helped a couple close on a house. The husband thanked me, said I'd changed their lives. I cried in my car for an hour after because I realized that's what you did. Every day, at the restaurant, at the foundation. You changed lives by staying people. I forgot how to see people. I only saw what they could do for me. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. I know that. But I am sorry for all of it. You deserved better than what I gave you. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. I hope someday I find it too." Kenneth read it twice, folded it, put it in the drawer with Edward's letters. Didn't respond. Didn't need to. William retired in September. Not from the company, just from the pace. Stepped back to advisory role. Let the younger partners take operational control. Called Kenneth on a Thursday evening. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why Edward built this. Not to accumulate, to deploy." William paused. "I forgot that somewhere along the way. You reminded me." Kenneth was at the restaurant, closing up, chairs on tables. "I'm just trying to do what's right." "I know, that's the point." William's voice got quieter. Edward would have been proud. "For what it's worth a lot." They hung up. Kenneth finished mopping, locked up, drove home through Atlanta at midnight. City lights reflected off glass towers, cranes silhouetted against the sky. The endless rebuilding. He'd been part of it now. Whether he wanted to be or not, the encounter happened in October. Kenneth was at a charity event. Rare appearance. William had insisted. Good for Marshall Capital's relationships. Good for the foundation's reputation. Black tie, Buckhead Hotel, silent auction. People in suits that cost more than most people's cars. Kenneth wore the tuxedo William had made him buy. Still felt wrong. He was standing by the bar when Christopher Hayes walked up. Kenneth saw him coming. Had time to leave. Didn't. Christopher stopped 3 feet away. Looked older, thinner. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Kenneth, Christopher. 10 seconds passed. Then Christopher extended his hand. I know you don't have to shake this. Kenneth looked at the hand. At Christopher's face. At the man who'd taken Stephanie and nearly destroyed Kenneth's sense of who he was. Shook it. Christopher's shoulders dropped. Slight. Relief. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much. But I am. Kenneth waited. Christopher continued. What I did. Pressuring your suppliers, leaking information, trying to force your hand. It was desperation. And desperation made me cruel. He paused. You could have destroyed me. Should have. I would have. If our positions were reversed. Kenneth thought about that. About what he would have done 6 months ago. A year ago. Before Edward's letter. Before the test. Before understanding what staying kind actually cost. Maybe Kenneth's voice came out even. But that's not who I want to be. Christopher nodded slowly. I'm not running the company anymore. My father took it back. I'm doing consulting now. Smaller projects. Trying to rebuild. Good. You mean that? Kenneth considered. Yeah, I do. Christopher looked at him. Something like wonder in his face. I don't understand you. Kenneth almost smiled. I don't understand me either sometimes. Christopher started to say something else. Stopped. Just nodded. Walked away. Kenneth watched him go. Felt something release in his chest. Something he'd been holding for months without realizing it. Not forgiveness exactly. Just letting go. Stephanie's mother called in November. Kenneth almost didn't answer. Saw the name on the screen. Remembered Christmas 2017. The way she'd looked at him across the dinner table. The way she'd told Stephanie later. Loud enough for Kenneth to hear. That her daughter deserved better than a cook. But he answered Kenneth. It's Diane. I know. Pause. I wanted to apologize. For what I said. For how I treated you. Kenneth sat down. This he hadn't expected. Stephanie told me what happened. What she did. What you could have done. Diane's voice shook slightly. And I realized I'm the one who taught her to think like that. To measure people by what they could give her instead of who they were. Brief silence. I'm sorry. Kenneth didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. Diane continued. She's doing better now. In Charleston. She seems, I don't know, lighter. Like she's not carrying something heavy anymore. That's good. I hope you're doing well too. I am good. That's good. She hung up. Kenneth sat with the phone in his hand for several minutes. The foundation's first anniversary arrived in December. Patricia put together a report. Numbers, impact, stories. Kenneth read it in his office. 112 restaurants funded. Total loans, 47 million. 98% repayment rate. 1,200 families supported through cancer treatment. Total deployed, 32 million. Patricia had included letters. Restaurant owners thanking the foundation, saying it saved their lives, their businesses, their dreams. Family members thanking the foundation, saying it let them focus on their loved ones instead of bills. Let them be present for the last months, last weeks, last days. Kenneth read everyone. By the end, his eyes were wet. Patricia knocked on the door. You okay? Kenneth nodded. Yeah. She came in. Sat. We're doing something real here. I know. Patricia smiled. Edward would be proud. Kenneth looked at the letters spread across the desk. I hope so. Christmas came. Kenneth spent it at Marshall's Smokehouse. Opened on Christmas Day. Tradition he'd started 5 years ago. Free meal for anyone who came in. No questions, no judgment. Homeless, elderly, people who had nowhere else to go. They came. Kenneth and Maria and the rest of the staff served 200 meals between noon and 6 p.m. Turkey, ham, all the sides, pie. Kenneth worked the line. Handed out plates, talked to people, an old man. 70s, worn coat, kind eyes, shook Kenneth's hand. This is the best meal I've had all year. Thank you. Kenneth felt it hit him. This was why. Not the foundation numbers, not the millions deployed, not the impact metrics. This, one person, one meal, one moment of dignity. The call came on a Tuesday in April. Kenneth was at Marshall Capital, meeting with legal about foundation expansion. Sarah knocked on the door. Your father's on line 1. Kenneth froze. His father, who he hadn't spoken to in 8 years, who hadn't come to Becca's funeral, who'd cut ties with Edward and never looked back. Kenneth stared at the phone, picked it up. Hello, Kenneth. It's your father. I know. 30 seconds of silence. I saw the article. In Texas Monthly. About what you're doing. Pause. I wanted to call. To say I'm proud of you. Kenneth felt something crack in his chest. Took you 2 years. His father's voice got quiet. I know. I'm sorry. I should have called when Edward died. Should have been there. Another pause. I was angry at him for so long I forgot how to stop being angry. And that's on me. Kenneth closed his eyes. Why are you calling now? Because life's short. Because I'm 68 and I've wasted too much of it being stubborn. His father's voice shook slightly. Because you're my son and I miss you. Kenneth opened his eyes. Looked out at Atlanta. At the city he'd inherited along with Edward's money. I miss you too. Can we talk? Maybe dinner? Kenneth thought about it. About holding grudges. About staying angry. About wasting years on pride. About everything Edward's letter had tried to teach him. Yeah, dinner sounds good. They set a date. Kenneth hung up. Sat at his desk for 10 minutes. Then called Patricia. Cancel my afternoon. I need to take a drive. Kenneth drove to Westview Cemetery in the middle of the day. Weekday afternoon. Quiet. Nobody around. Walked to Becca's grave. Sat. My father called. First time in 8 years. Wind through the magnolia. He wants to have dinner. Talk. Try to fix things. Kenneth pulled a weed. I'm going to do it. Because you tell me to. Because holding on to anger just makes you tired. Pause. I learned that from Edward. From the test. From all of this, Kenneth looked at the headstone. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. But I'm different. He stood. I love you. Always will. Walked back to his van. The dinner with his father happened 2 weeks later. Small restaurant. Midtown. Quiet. They sat in a back booth. Kenneth's father looked older. Grayer. Smaller somehow. They ordered. Made small talk. Weather. Traffic. Safe things. Then his father set down his menu. I need to say this. I was wrong. About Edward. About the fight. About cutting him out of my life. Pause. I was 26, angry. Convinced I knew everything. Edward wanted me to join his company. I wanted to do my own thing. We fought. Said things we shouldn't have said. He looked at Kenneth, and I was too proud to apologize. So I let it sit for 30 years, and then he died. And I never got the chance. Kenneth listened. His father continued. I did the same thing to you. Not as long. But the same pattern. You married Becca. I thought you should have finished college first. We fought. I didn't come to the wedding. Voice breaking slightly. And then Becca died. And I should have been there. Should have helped you through it. But I was still angry about something that didn't matter. He stopped. I'm sorry, Kenneth. For all of it. Kenneth felt tears in his eyes. I forgive you. His father looked up. Surprised? Just like that? Kenneth thought about Edward. About the test. About 90 days that had taught him what mattered. Just like that. Life's too short. I don't want to waste any more of it being angry. His father reached across the table. Took Kenneth's hand. Squeezed. Thank you. They ate dinner. Talked about real things. The restaurant. The foundation. Kenneth's life. His father told stories about Edward when they were kids. Before the fight. Before the anger. Kenneth listened. Learned about his uncle through his father's memories. Saw a different Edward. Younger. Kinder. Before business hardened him. Before money separated him from everyone he loved. At the end of dinner, his father paid. Can we do this again? Kenneth smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. They hugged in the parking lot. First time in 8 years. Kenneth drove home feeling lighter than he had in years. The second year passed faster than the first. Foundation deployed another 90 million. Helped 300 restaurants. 2,000 families. Kenneth stopped counting after a while. Just kept working. Marshall Capital ran smoothly. New leadership. Strong numbers. Clean operations. Kenneth showed up when needed. Stayed out of the way when not. Trusted the people Edward had trusted. Marshall's Smokehouse thrived. Lines around the block most weekends. Reviews that called it the best barbecue in Atlanta. Offers to franchise, to expand, to turn it into something bigger. Kenneth declined all of them. Liked it the way it was. Small, real his. The reporter showed up at Marshall's Smokehouse on a Saturday in June. Young, mid-30s, notebook. Recording app on her phone. Kenneth was prepping for dinner rush. Brisket in the smoker. Ribs on the grill. She introduced herself at the counter. Rachel Winters. Texas Monthly. I'm doing a piece on the Becca Marshall Foundation. Tracking where the money's going. Who it's helping. Kenneth wiped his hands. I don't do interviews. I know. I called your office. They said the same thing. Rachel smiled. But I wanted to ask anyway. The foundation's helped almost 2,000 people in 8 months. That's significant. People should know about it. They don't need to know who's behind it. Don't you think they deserve to know where the help came from? Kenneth thought about Marcus Webb, about the thank you that had meant more than any press coverage ever could. The help matters. Not the source. Rachel wrote something in her notebook. Can I ask why you named it after your wife? Kenneth felt his throat tighten, because she would have wanted to help people. This is how I honor that. Rachel looked at him. Something shifted in her face. I lost my father to pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. The bills almost destroyed my mother. Pause. If something like your foundation had existed then, it would have changed everything. Kenneth met her eyes. I'm sorry about your father. Rachel nodded. Me too. She put away her notebook. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing matters. Whether you take credit or not, she left. Kenneth went back to the grill. But her words stayed with him. Whether you take credit or not, the article ran in August. Kenneth didn't read it. Maria did. Brought it to him on a Tuesday morning. Boss, you need to see this. The piece was called, The Richest Man in Atlanta is the One Nobody Recognizes in His Own Kitchen. Detailed investigation. Rachel had tracked down restaurant owners who'd gotten loans, families who'd gotten support during cancer treatment, employees at Marshall Capital who spoke anonymously about Kenneth's management style. The article never mentioned Kenneth's wealth directly, just described him as someone who'd inherited a real estate empire and chose to spend his weekends pulling brisket from a smoker. Someone who could have retired to a penthouse but still mopped floors at closing time. Someone who measured success differently than most people with 9 zeros in their net worth. Kenneth read it once, folded the magazine, set it aside, went back to work. The calls started that afternoon. Journalists, podcasters, documentary filmmakers, all wanting interviews, all wanting the story behind the foundation, behind the inheritance, behind the quiet billionaire who worked a smoker on Saturday nights. Kenneth declined everyone. Told Sarah to send a standard response. Mr. Marshall appreciates the interest but does not grant interviews. The foundation's work speaks for itself. Sarah sent it 83 times in 2 weeks. Eventually the calls slowed. The media moved on. Kenneth went back to being invisible. Preferred it that way. The invitation came in March of the second year. Georgia Restaurant Association, Annual Awards Dinner, Lifetime Achievement Award. For Kenneth Marshall, in recognition of dedication to the culinary community and support for small businesses across the Southeast. Kenneth almost declined. Maria talked him into it. Boss, you should go. These people want to honor you. I don't need to be honored, maybe not, but they need to honor you. Let them. Kenneth went, rented a tuxedo, showed up, sat through dinner. The award presentation came after dessert. Montage video, photos of Marshall's smokehouse over the years, interviews with employees, customers, other restaurant owners. Then the president of the association, older woman, respected, been in the industry 40 years, took the microphone. Kenneth Marshall represents something we don't see enough anymore. Dedication, integrity, excellence without ego. She looked at Kenneth. He's not just a great chef, he's a great human being. And that's rarer. Standing ovation. Kenneth stood, walked to the stage, accepted a plaque he'd never display. The association president handed him the microphone. Expected a speech. Kenneth looked out at 300 people. Restaurant owners, chefs, industry people who'd spent their lives feeding others. His people. I don't have much to say, just thank you. To everyone who eats at places like mine, who supports small businesses, who understands that food is more than fuel. It's connection, it's memory, it's love. Pause, keep cooking, keep caring, keep feeding people. He handed back the microphone, walked off stage. Another standing ovation. Kenneth sat down. Maria leaned over. That was perfect, boss. The second awards ceremony happened in June. Atlanta Business Chronicle, Philanthropist of the Year, Kenneth Marshall. Becca Marshall Foundation, for impact on the community, for supporting small businesses and families in crisis. Kenneth went because Patricia said it mattered for the foundation's credibility. Same tuxedo, same dinner, same kind of plaque. But this time the speech felt different. 300 people in the ballroom. Kenneth took the microphone. I didn't start the foundation to win awards. I started it because my wife died of cancer. And I couldn't save her. Couldn't do anything but watch. Pause. Room very quiet. The foundation is my way of helping other people not feel that helpless. Of making sure families can focus on their loved ones instead of bills. Kenneth looked out at the crowd. Every dollar we deploy is a dollar Becca would have deployed if she'd lived. This is how I keep her alive. How I honor what she believed in. His voice broke slightly. So thank you for the award. But the real thanks goes to her. For teaching me what matters. He set down the microphone, walked off stage, standing ovation again. But this time Kenneth felt it. Felt the weight of what he'd built. Felt Becca's presence in it. Felt okay. Year 3 started quietly. Foundation expanded into new cities. Nashville, Charlotte, Birmingham, Jacksonville. More restaurants, more families. Impact spreading like ripples. Kenneth stepped back from day-to-day operations. Hired an executive director. Someone who understood nonprofits, who could scale the work. Stayed involved in strategy, in big decisions, in making sure the mission stayed pure. But gave up control. Trusted others to carry it forward. Marshall Capital ran itself. Strong leadership. Good numbers. Clean reputation. Kenneth showed up for board meetings. Signed important documents. Stayed out of the way. Let the company be what Edward built it to be. Marshall's smokehouse remained his anchor. 4 days a week. Grill, smoker, customers. Real work. Honest work. The thing that kept him grounded when everything else felt too big. The journalist from Texas Monthly called again. 2 years after her first article. Rachel Winters. Kenneth took the call. I'm doing a follow-up piece. 2 years later. How the foundation's grown. Where it's headed. Kenneth leaned back in his chair. Same answer as before. I don't do interviews. Rachel laughed. I know. But I had to ask. Pause. Off the record, do you ever think about Stephanie Abbott? Kenneth looked out the window. Atlanta in summer, hazy, hot, alive sometimes. Not with anger, just sadness, for both of us. Rachel's voice got softer. Regret? Kenneth thought about it. Really thought no. She wanted a man who'd use $140 billion to prove he mattered. I realized I already mattered. To Becca. To the people I feed. To the families we help. Pause. A man isn't measured by who he destroys when he's powerful. He's measured by who he stays when he is. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Can I use that? The quote? Kenneth smiled. Sure. Just don't attach my name to it. Rachel laughed again. Deal. They hung up. Kenneth sat at his desk, looked at the photo he kept there now. Becca. Wedding day. Laughing. Felt at peace. Finally, Christmas came again. Third one since the inheritance. Kenneth opened Marshall's smokehouse on Christmas Day. Same tradition. Free meals, no questions. 300 people this year. More than last year, more than the year before. Word was spreading. Kenneth worked the line with Maria and the staff. Handed out plates, talked to people, listened to stories. An elderly woman, 80s, elegant despite worn clothes, took his hand. My husband and I used to come here. Before he passed. This was his favorite place. Kenneth felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry for your loss. The woman smiled. Don't be. We had 42 good years. And he loved your brisket. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for keeping this place the same. For not changing it into something fancy. Some things should stay real. Kenneth nodded. Some things should. That night, Kenneth drove to Westview Cemetery. For what he knew would be the last time like this. Climbed the fence. Walked to Becca's grave. Sat. I think this is the last time I'm coming here like this. Not because I don't miss you, but because I think I finally understand what you'd want me to do. Wind through the Magnolia live. Not just exist, not just work, but actually, live. Kenneth looked at the headstone. I'm going to keep the restaurant, keep the foundation, keep showing up. Pause. But I'm going to stop at your grave at midnight like some kind of ghost. I'm going to visit during the day. Like a normal person. Like someone who's moving forward instead of staying stuck. He stood. I love you. Always will. But I think you'd want me to be okay now. Kenneth touched the headstone one last time. I am okay. Finally, walked back to his van, drove home, didn't look back. Kenneth turned 40 on a Tuesday in October. Spent it at Marshall's smokehouse. Regular day, nothing special. Maria brought out a cake at closing. Small chocolate. One candle. Make-a-wish boss. Kenneth looked at the candle. At Maria. At the restaurant he'd built with his own hands. At the life he'd chosen to keep instead of the one he could have bought. I don't need to wish for anything. I already have everything I need. Maria smiled. That's the right answer. Kenneth blew out the candle. The last scene doesn't happen in a boardroom or a cemetery or even a restaurant. It happens at a grocery store on a Saturday morning. Kenneth in jeans and t-shirt, baseball cap, anonymous, shopping for the restaurant. Meat, spices, produce. Normal, a young woman, late 20s, familiar somehow, approached him in the spice aisle. Excuse me, are you Kenneth Marshall? Kenneth looked up. Yeah. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My mother died 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Your foundation helped us, covered her hospital bills. Let us focus on being with her instead of worrying about money." She paused. "I wanted to say thank you. You gave us the gift of time, of presence, of not being destroyed by something that was already destroying us." Kenneth felt his chest tighten. "I'm glad we could help." The woman wiped her eyes. "My mom's last words to me were, remember the kindness. She meant yours, the foundation's, the stranger who helped us when nobody else would." She smiled through tears. "I think about that every day. Remember the kindness. Pass it on." Kenneth couldn't speak, just nodded. The woman touched his arm, walked away. Kenneth stood in the spice aisle for 5 minutes, then finished his shopping, loaded the van, drove to Marshall's smokehouse, unloaded everything, prepped for the day, started the smoker, put the brisket on, let the smoke rise, let the work settle him, let the rhythm remind him why any of it mattered. At noon the first customers arrived. Kenneth served them, same as always, in order. Everyone equal, everyone seen. The brisket came out perfect that night, bark like leather, inside pink and tender. Kenneth pulled it from the smoker, let it rest, sliced it, served it. Same as he'd done for 17 years. Same as he'd do for 17 more if his hands held out. Because this was real, this mattered, this was enough. And enough, Kenneth finally understood, was not a number you hit. It was a place you chose. A place where feeding people mattered more than impressing them. Where showing up mattered more than standing out. Where being the same man at the top as you were at the bottom was the only wealth worth having. Kenneth Marshall chose that place, every day. For the rest of his life, his father became a regular. Came in twice a month, sat at the back booth, ordered brisket. They talked, made up for lost time, built something new from the wreckage of what they'd broken. The foundation helped 5,000 families in year 4, 8,000 in year 5, deployed 200 million total, changed lives Kenneth would never know about, impact that moved through the world invisible and infinite. Marshall's smokehouse stayed the same. Small, real his. Line around the block most Saturdays, best brisket in Atlanta. Kenneth never franchised, never expanded, never tried to make it something bigger, kept it exactly what it was. A place where everyone got served in order, where nobody was invisible, where food meant connection. Christopher Hayes sent Kenneth a letter 5 years after their encounter at the charity event. Simple. Direct thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I've thought about that every day since, about what kind of man chooses mercy over victory. I hope I'm becoming that kind of man. Slowly, but becoming. Kenneth kept the letter, never responded. Didn't need to. Stephanie stayed in Charleston. Built a good life there, small, honest, different from what she'd chased. Kenneth never reached out. Some doors close for good reasons. Better to let them stay closed. The rest of Kenneth's story doesn't have an ending. Because life doesn't end with neat resolutions. It keeps going. Kenneth kept running Marshall Capital. Kept working at Marshall's smokehouse. Kept funding the foundation. A man is not measured by what he can take from the people who took from him. He's measured by what he refuses to take when he finally has the power to take everything. The man who walks out of the kitchen the same way he walked in is the only kind of rich man worth becoming. Kenneth Marshall refused, and in refusing built something bigger than revenge, bigger than wealth, bigger than himself. He built a legacy measured in changed lives, in families kept whole, in dignity preserved, in the simple act of staying kind when the world gave him every reason not to. Enough was not a number, it was a choice. And Kenneth made that choice every single day.